Donald Trump, how can I say this? It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Donald Trump is no good or will undermine his own campaign, undermine his own players, undermine his own team. But today was spectacular. Today was spectacular because Donald Trump literally, well, not today. It came out today in the New York Times article about Donald Trump, audio of Donald Trump basically saying, had he known that Jeff Sessions would have recused himself, he would have picked someone else. Now, when I first saw the headline, I'm like, okay, somebody's taking this out of context. This is clickbait, or this is fake news, because he couldn't possibly be this dumb to say these exact words. But the president of the United States is actually that dumb to say those exact words. He said, had he known that Jeff Sessions was going to recuse himself, he would have picked someone else. Ironically, it still goes to show you exactly how much Donald Trump can say and get away with before people actually have enough of him. Because this to me translates as I had every intention to use Jeff Sessions as a way of blocking any investigation into the Russia collusion. That's how I read it. I mean, that's what else is he trying to say there? Except for had he known Jeff Sessions wouldn't have had the temerity to stick it through and not recuse himself, that he would have picked someone else. And that he had the full expectation that Jeff Sessions was going to be a buffer for him in the role of the Attorney General's office. That's what stands out. And, you know, Donald Trump thinks he's smart, right? He knows all the big words. But he reveals so much with just such a simple question, asking him how he felt about Jeff Sessions' recusal. And he said he felt that this was unfair to the president. You know, it shows you that he has an expectation of the people who are working with him. He has an expectation that they are there solely to serve his purposes. That's what he's saying. He's saying that he has a full expectation that there's nothing more important in this role. There's nothing more important to him than to have an attorney general to work on behalf of the Russia investigation, but not everything else that the attorney general is supposed to do. So in other words, yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I want to make sure that I'm saying it as succinctly as possible. Donald Trump, by saying he would have picked someone else, says that nothing else mattered to him in the role of an attorney general than someone who was going to stand by his side throughout the Russia investigation. Now, this in and of itself is not an admission of guilt, but how many times are we going to have to see smoke before we say, okay, there's something there? I was discussing the other night, I'm pretty sure I discussed the other night, the story of N. Bremer, the political scientist and the president of the Eurasia Group, who reported on Donald Trump having met with Vladimir Putin for a second time. And the reason I'm bringing that up in the context of the conversation with Jeff Sessions is that N. Bremer has been a vocal critic of the Russia narrative or the absence of evidence. And he still, even now, still suggests that there's not enough evidence to prove collusion. But despite his own skepticism, he agrees that the Trump administration has entirely lied entirely too much, and that at some point you have to look at what's going on and say, where there's enough smoke, there has to be a fire. I don't really know. I mean, the reason I'm hesitating is because it's really one of those things now that either you want to see it or you don't want to see it. You know, I'm the number one person throughout this entire process, not the number one person, but one of the leading people to say we need evidence. I want to see evidence before we go any further. And as we started to get evidence by proxy of the Donald Trump Jr. emails last week, and now we're getting evidence out of Donald Trump's own mouth saying that had he known Jeff Sessions was going to recuse himself, he would have never picked Jeff Sessions. I mean, at this point, I think it's safe to say that there is something there. Now, to what extent, that's the question. What can be proven, that's the question. What actually is a violation of the letter of the law, those are the important questions. One last thing I'll say about this before I'm joined by Salam Morkos is the fact that there's still any leader, any person calling for war around this topic needs to be excommunicated from the political class, from the commentary class, just across the board. And I say that in the context of this because reciprocity, yes, but a measured response. The last thing that we need is for people to use their platforms. I think it was Paul Begala, his name just came back to me, basically saying that we need to take this evidence and use it to figure out how we're going to strike Russia. No, not at all. So there's levels of reasonableness in this. And it's reasonable for us to say that looking at the evidence that has come out from Donald Trump Jr. and the words that are coming out of Donald Trump's mouth, Sr., his mouth himself, it's reasonable for us to say, okay, there's something here. Let's see where the investigation goes and let it go wherever it leads. But it's also reasonable for us to say there's no reason whatsoever for someone to be talking about an armed conflict with Russia over this. There should be something done, but an armed conflict with Russia, Paul Begala spouting that type of rhetoric really needs to be slapped in no uncertain terms.